Okay, so today we are going to talk on cost control. So now we are left with only few topics in this master class. Today we are going to cover today and tomorrow. Hopefully, also we are going to cover the cost control area, and then next week we will be covering the other aspects of the accounting, means the fixed assets, hotel fixed assets, inventory, GL, more on the accounting aspects of the or the accounts payable. So we're going to be covering those departments. Payroll we will not be doing much because it's not that really significant aspect, and payroll laws are different everywhere. So I don't intend to, but I will just cover only the key control areas which needs to be there. Um, so I'm still not yet finalized the slides for those topics, but I will be working on them in the either tomorrow or coming week, so that we can discuss them. So I have given you the access of the cost control course. Have you received it already? You got an email?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Safi, did you get it?
Getting emails.
Yeah, you should have got an email for the cost control course to register to the cost control course as well. So I had a
Uh,
pre-recorded video. So those are
yes.
pre-recorded videos which I recorded some time back. But that was actually 2019 when I started teaching for the first time. So that was one of my master class that I delivered physically in Yangon. So a lot of cost controllers joined that class. So these videos
You
are,
mean this one, food and beverage?
that's right, food and beverage cost control. Correct.
Are you referring to this one, food and beverage general cost control? This one. Ah,
Yes,
I got it.
yes, yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. This is the cost control course. So basically, this will give you an idea of what is the cost control process, F&B cost control, basically, because we normally in F&B in hotels, that's the major cost to that cost controller is controlling, right? So I have covered the basic control process from the purchasing to the every other thing, and what are the accounts. So today we are going to discuss the accounting aspects of those cost control processes. So the fundamental terms that we have here, basically the in the sales, there are sales by type. So normally when in the cost control we are analyzing the sales, we look at the sales by type. So now what is the meaning of type? The in F&B there are usually food sales, beverage sales, tobacco sales, other sales. So or the cover charges. So these are the normally the type of the sale. Now the benefit of understanding the sales by this type is basically to understand and relate them with their relevant cost, because food normally has a different cost percentage than the beverage, and the tobacco may have a different cost percentage. Cover and other charges usually does not require any direct cost of sales, because they are just only the covering charge. So that's why it's important to understand the sales by the type. What is the type of the sale, whether it's food, whether it's beverage. Then these food can further be broken down into, let's say, the by the type of the food. So you can have appetizers, you can have main course, you can have dessert. So you can subcategorize the food into multiple categories, right? So you want to understand that as well, so that you know, if your every total food cost if your total food revenue is, let's say, $100, how much of you are getting from the desserts, how much is it getting from the main course, how much is it getting from the dessert, from the salads or other type of meals, and also by meal period. So that's the another type of the sales. So you have sales by type, by category, by person, per person, how much money is being spent by the guest per person, right? So these are the normal statistics that these cost control is interested in, for the simple reason of analyzing the cost. per person, cost per category, cost by the type of the sales, so that they can figure out where the cost is getting wrong and how they can fix it. Now, this is not really the job of the chief accountant, but once if you know the concepts, it's easier for you to become and grow in as an assistant FC or even as an FC, because usually the chief accountants are stick with the GL only. They don't really want to understand, or they don't really understand the cost control aspects. And cost controllers usually report directly to assistant FC or to the FCs. Um, in the smaller hotels, the chief accountant is the boss. So the chief accountant is usually controlling the the cost control aspects as well. So that's why I have included everything into this concept course, so that everybody understand the concepts. Then the cost concepts basically are the some cost percentage. So in if you would know that in hospitality we never refer the cost as by its amount. We always refer as it as a percentage to the food revenue or to the beverage revenue or to anything, right? So if you ask what's your hotel food cost, you are basically not asking the dollar amount. You're always asking the percentage, right? And percentage is the only way you can compare it with the previous month, previous year, or with another hotel, because the base, the food revenue is varying every month, every week, every by the hotel, by the outlet. So the cost percentage is the guiding principle of the hospitality industry. So in every hotel normally has a standard of the food cost percentage, whether it's 30% or 35%. Now, what is the basis of that specification? How do they define what should be the ideal food cost percentage? Any idea?
It should be like between 30 to 35.
No, but where that 30 to 35% comes from? Why?
Usually.
Hmm. There is a lot. There is usually a logic. It's not a usual. So this 30-35% comes from where?
No, no, I meant it comes from usually standards, I
No,
meant.
no, no. Usually also not does not describe any cost percentage. They don't give any standard. They just give only this how to record the food cost. They don't give how much it should be. So usually
Like
you
it
know
should
that.
come from
Hmm?
GM or
No,
owner of
no,
the company.
no. It's not. It doesn't come from there as well. It depends on what are the other costs. You see, the to make the revenue from the to make a profit from the restaurant, you have two main direct costs, right? One is the food, and the other is the labor. Plus, you have some other very small serving charges. Those are not very big. They are very like small percentage, maybe up to maximum of 5% to 6%. The consumables cost, right? The equipment, the crockery, the cutlery, the menu, the straw, the paper cup, and everything else. Just only 5 to 6%, not much. So there are only two major costs in food and beverage industry. One is the food cost, one other is the labor cost. Now it depends, and plus there is no it does not consider the electricity, does not consider the rental of the hotel, right? So assume you are a standalone hotel where you have to pay the rent, you have to pay the utilities, and also pay the salaries plus the food cost. So if let's say you want to earn a decent margin, so you have to recalculate back how much is your investment, how much margin you want, what would be your sales, estimated sales. So to get that margin on that sales, what is your ideal profit percentage? Let's say it comes to 30% that you have to earn on your sales. So this is how it can work. Let's say you have to spend $10,000 to get up a restaurant, and you want a return of let's say 12% per annum. It's a hypothetical example, right? So it means you want at least $1,200 to be provided by the restaurant on on a yearly basis. That's the minimum that they have to earn. So it means that it's $100 a month, right? That's the minimum. Now let's say the restaurant is able to do only $1,000 worth of sales. That's the maximum it can do. So it means you need to maintain at least 10% of the profit from the $1,000, right? If let's say it can do only 500, that means you need to have 20% of the, because that's your minimum required margin that you need to have, $100. So it means your cost is going to be only 80% the total. That includes your utilities, that includes your rental, that includes um, your sales and your labor plus the food. Correct. So that's the way how we calculate. Now, in a standard hotel, the you don't have to pay for utilities, you don't have to pay for the rental, but you still so they assume usually that the food and beverage outlet, if you have a food and beverage outlet, you have an investment there. So you have to earn at least 25, 30 to 40% of the food revenue profitability to be able to serve, to be able to sustain the other cost, right? The notional rental, if it's a notional rental, plus the utilities. Now, it's not a standard by any chance. It's just a practice in the hospitality based on the experiences of asset managers that the profit F&B should be giving a profitability of at least 40% of the revenue. But it doesn't mean that it's a fixed amount, right? It depends on what is the size of the outlet. So if it's a banquet, you can go higher because they are going to give you a very high income. If it's a very popular restaurant, you can go higher on the cost because even if it give you a less profit percentage, the actual absolute margin that it will be giving is enough to cover the utilities, enough to cover the rental, enough to cover the profitability or the return on the investment. So that's the factor which we normally decide. If let's say I am doing an asset management of the hotel, what I would do is I would check if I don't have this hotel restaurant in my hotel, I have rented out, how much money I would get, let's say on a rental. So that's the minimum margin the hotel has to earn, a restaurant has to earn. Then I will divide this by their average revenue of let's say last 6 months and to see what should be their margin, and based on that I will deduct the labor cost, which is usually fixed amount, right? Then the balance is left only for food, right? So it in average history of the hospitality, it comes to about 30 to 35%, but that's the logic of why it should be not more than 35%. But it doesn't mean that it's 35% is fixed. If the hotel is doing, if the restaurant is doing a super high volume, then it can go higher on the cost because the absolute returns it's going to give is going to be much higher. So that's the history of cost percentage, how we set up the cost percentage. Got it?
Sir, one moment. I just wanted to share one thing.
Yes.
Is it? Can you tell me if it is in line with it? Can I just share my screen quickly?
Yes. Yes. You can.
Is it sharing?
Let me. Yeah, it's coming now.
The PPT is on the screen.
Yes. Context diagram.
Yeah, in the top right corner, we see that finance.
Mm-hmm.
Over there, we see from revenue management, we are having that line going into it for target cost and growth.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing we're talking, right? So based on the pricing strategy on how much we
Yes.
are trying to make on a margin, we are deriving the target cost and it's going to finance accordingly.
Correct. Correct. Yes. Based on your maximum price, based on to maximize the value of the hotel, that's what it is. You're right.
Okay, okay. Okay, I'll just withdraw.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So that's the way how we decide, how we get the cost, maximum cost that is allowable as food cost, right, or a beverage cost. So it depends on what are the size of the hotel, what is the revenue the hotel is making, and what is the popularity of the hotel. Usually to increase the you would always see your GM saying or crying or yelling that don't worry about the food cost percentage so far as we are able to bring in the volumes. To bring in the volume, you run a percentage, you run a food cost. you run a discounted promotions, buy one get one, or those kind of things to gain the revenues in. So the major motto they have in their mind is that if even if we are running at a high food cost, if we are able to bring in the more revenue, we can still sustain the high food cost percentage because it's just a cost percentage. It is nothing, it's not giving us any profitability, right? So the cost percentage works as a guideline only, but you can always sell at a higher food cost percentage so far as you are getting these as an extra income from your usual, and you are covering your fixed cost. So don't get fixated on 30 or 35% food cost, because that's not a right strategy. So it depends on what's the volume that we can drive, right? Then the other part of the cost is fixed and variable cost. So in the cost control, you would know there is usually a fixed cost and there are usually variable cost. Means fixed cost increase with the sales volume, and variable cost, sorry, fixed cost does not increase with the variable with the revenue, and variable cost increase with the revenue and the volume of the business. So whether it's food revenue or the other type of revenue, but in the restaurant or in the hotels, usually the crockeries, the machineries, the equipments, the labor are pretty much fixed. You know that you need minimum manning for to serve a minimum revenue, and even the revenue is growing, you don't have to increase the manpower for that purpose. So that's the difference between the variable and fixed cost is that, and it's important to find out what are your fixed costs and what are your variable costs so that you can manage them effectively. And then there is a standard cost. Now, the standard cost, what does it mean? It means that we have a standard, right? So you have heard of recipes. So those are the standard costs. So the hotels, when they are defining the recipe of the anything, they define that, okay, this is what is my current cost based on market prices. This is going to be my recipe cost. Based on that standard cost, I will define my selling prices. So that becomes a standard cost. And that also is usually a measure of managing the food cost percentage. Then we always compare what is the standard cost of sales by the sales volume, and what is the actual food cost percentage. Is there any striking difference between the two? If yes, what's the difference? Is it more or is it less? If it's less, it means you are not following the standard recipe, which is means it may also mean that either you are cutting down on the quality and the portion sizes, or you are just getting efficient and your standard cost was not wrong, was not correct. If it's more, your actual cost is more than the standard cost, that it means you are wasting a lot, right? Or your standard cost was wrong. So it's important for the cost controllers and chief accountants to verify and analyze what's the problem, what is the standard cost and what is the real cost, right? And then you have the the last cost concept is the controllable cost and non-controllable cost. So there are always costs which are you can control, the hotel can control and save, and there are certain costs which are non-controllable. So can you give me an example of non-controllable cost in the hotel, the cost which cannot be controlled by the hotel?
Rent.
Electricity.
Hmm?
Electricity.
Yeah, largely electricity is not in their control. They don't control the price. They don't control the how much the consume, how much the equipment is going to use. So, but they can turn it off, right? So it's not 100% non-controllable. It's controllable to some extent.
The rent, the lease.
Rent is not controllable by the hotel because it's not defining in the hands of the it defined by the owners, right, of the hotel. What else is non-controllable? Marketing expenses,
Very controllable.
I would say not really very controllable, because you cannot
No?
control everything in marketing. You still have to do some marketing, even if you, unless you go out of business, you don't have to do the marketing at all, right? But let's say there are sales offices, you can't control their cost because those are fixed cost. even though they may not be able to generate any kind of business. Unless you close them, you really cannot control their cost, right? So even the
Mhm.
controllable costs are not really 100% in your control. They are some to some extent they are non-controllable. So the only thing that the hotel need to know is that how much control I can exercise on these costs. If I can, I should worry about them. If I don't, then I should not be worrying about them and even should not be measuring them as a part of my KPI, right? So I would not care about what is the rental as a percentage to revenue, because rental I can't control at all. So it doesn't matter. So I should not be worrying about it. I should worry about the things which I can control: food cost, beverage cost, wastage. So those are the things which are partly in my control, but so I can put them under my KPIs, but the rest I will not be really putting my energy on it, right? So then you have recipe. Recipe means the standard ingredients of the food or beverage items, bar items, or anything. So it's the standard way of making the recipe, standard way of making the dish. So what are the ingredients going there? We will be looking at in more details how we make the recipes later on. And then the portions. So the meaning of portions is the one portion which you are making, by which you are making the recipe. So once a recipe is made for, let's say, a minimum recipe is for 10 portions, so that the cost and the pricing we would be calculating by, not by one portion, means per person, right? It will be one portion. So one portion is equal to 10, equal to consumption of 10 people. So we are setting up the prices based on that. What is the minimum portion that we need to cook for, as per the recipe, right? It can be made for two people, can be made for four people, can be made for six people, can be made for 10 people. So understanding what is the standard portion is important, and what is the portion size. What How many people can eat it, and what is the size of it? It can be 200 grams, can be 500 grams, can be 1 kilo, or whatever, right? Then you have perishable and non-perishable items. So most of the vegetables are stand and meat items are perishable unless they are frozen. So the hotel have to identify what are perishable and non-perishable, and normally they have standard processes how to handle these two different type of items. Then the another concept is the perpetual inventory. So means that your inventory need to be maintained on a perpetual basis. Whenever it's moving, you should automatically get the right balance, and then not based on batch, that you take out the items first and then go and post into the system, and then you only know what is your balance and what are your reorder levels, and what are minimum order levels, and then you replenish it, right? So that's the meaning of perpetual inventory. It's adjusted with every single transaction. PAR is another fundamental term that we use in cost control. We will be using it more very often. The PAR means the standard, right? So PAR can be set up for bar, how many bottles I need, what is the minimum, how many wines I need, how many bottles of that wine, how many beers I need. So that's the bar. That's a PAR, PAR, PAR for the bar, right? And then there is a par usually for the inventory items. If I need to stock, let's say, chicken, how many kilo of chicken I need to store in my stock. What is the par for the kitchen? So means they have a standard how much they should be keeping in their store or on their circulation. So hotels usually have a standard for every single process. What should be the par in the stock, in the inventory? What should be the par in the circulation? What should be the par in the bar, and everything else. Um, and the par is set up for food, for beverage, for linens, for chinaware, for glassware, for silverware. Everything which is used normally has a par level, and that is the guiding figure for deciding when to order more. And par is set up based on a specific formula which I will be sharing you next. Then you have a reorder level, which means that at what level you should be making a new order. So par is just only the standard, that how much maximum, or you can say how much you should be keeping it in your stock. Then there are reorder levels, minimum order level, and a maximum order level based on the inventory. So the PAR is different from these three. And then you have a break-even point, means where you are making the profit or loss, right? When you are not making any profit, not making any loss, that's called break-even point. Okay, so these were the minimum, the fundamental terms that I wanted to share. Any questions on this, or is it okay?
All clear, sir.
Yes. All clear. Yes.
Okay. So the qualities of the good cost controller usually is also the same as the qualities of good income auditor, ability to understand the trends and analyze and make sense of the data, because you have to also deal with a lot of data, right? Menu analysis, recipe cost control, setting of the previous year's numbers, comparing the cost against them. So it's a lot of analytical items, and you also need to have a very good understanding of food and beverage items, basically. So you should be comfortable, if we are talking about the different type of beef, different type of meat, all the alcohol beverages, non-alcoholic beverages, and the recipes, how we make them. So this usually, if you are a new cost controller, you just have to observe how they are how they are making, and you need to familiarize yourself with the taste also, and the smell of everything, right? So that's a very important aspect of doing a cost control job. That's why I cannot do it, because I am very bad at it. Then you have understanding the latest trends in the market for recipe and promotions, because usually the cost controller is also responsible to suggest what can be the alternative recipe, or what are the promotions that the food and that the F&B can generate, or at least to understand what are the trends in the market, and how they are managing it, right, from the accounting perspective, if not from the marketing perspective. Then has to have a strong leadership to enforce the standards, because as we will see, there are a lot of standards in F&B, because it all comes for a price of consistency, right? So the food is all about having a consistent taste, consistent size, consistent presentation. So it means there has to be consistent input also. So it means the receiving has a standard, storing has a standard, receiving has a standard, purchasing has a standard. So all those standards are important to maintain the cost of the food and beverage. So the F&B guy, F&B cost controller, has to be very strong with understanding those standards and apply those standards, and auditing skills. So very important aspect of to find out what went wrong and where it went wrong. So that's an important skill you need. So the general process of the cost control department usually is, always the first task is to establish the standards for everything, right? From receiving to store to power levels to recipes to the cost to the prices, everything. Recipe size, standard display size, how you're going to serve, everything has to have a standard, and how you're going to store it, how you're going to transport it. So everything has to got a standard. So that's the first thing in the cost control. Cost controllers are usually not involved in setting up the standards. That's the job of the GM and the F&B or F&B service guy or the chef, right? They are the one who has to set up the standards, but the cost controller is to ensure that they are setting up the standard for everything. And then the next thing up in the process is to implement and train the staff on those standards. So that's the important thing, because if the standards are not good, if you don't train and if you don't implement them, right? Then that's the job of the cost control. The real job of cost control is to monitor the results. Not also to implement and train the staff. That is also the job of the chef or the F&B service, F&B director. The 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 job of the cost controller is to monitor the results of what are the results. Are we achieving these standards, or we are not achieving these standards? Are there any exceptions? Are our cost among the standards or not? And to actually calculate the results, how are we doing it? And then take and suggest the corrective action plans from the cost control perspective. What can we do to reduce the risk or reduce the anomaly? So that's the job of the cost control department, right? So the establishing the standard is the first part. So you have to establish the standard for each part of the business cycle, which is starting from the purchasing. What should be the purchasing? How many minimum quotes you need? What are the standard sizes that you need to buy? Who are the suppliers? Do they need to follow the HACCP or do they need to follow FDA? What they need to do, right? So those are all the standards that the purchasing need to have. Then you have receiving. What are the receiving conditions? How it has to be received? Who will receive? And what will happen after the receive? How is it going to be stored? Then the storing standards are there. What should be the difference between the how the store will be maintained? What should be the ventilation? How cool it has to be? How long it can be stored? What is the power levels? So those are the standards for storing department. And then issuing. Who issues? Who is the authorization person? What is the minimum type of issue? Then the production, right, from the kitchen. So how you are going to produce, what will be the yield, what will be the waste, how you are going to handle the wastage or the spillage and the breakage. So those are the standards that you need in the kitchen as well. And then you need for selling and serving. Where did you miss? I did not realize you guys are left. So you said you saw this
No,
slide.
it froze.
Ah,
Before the diagram on the right showed up till there, I was there till the one on the left was on the screen, and then
okay.
the screen froze.
Oh, okay, okay. Maybe maybe my internet connection was wrong, missing. Venki, you were there or you were also frozen? I was
It was
also
frozen,
frozen.
so I could not see.
Frozen. Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, I will repeat that. So basically, you have to establish the standard for every aspect of the business, which means the purchasing, what size, who will be the standard vendor, what standard they need to maintain, right? What are the size of the items, which things we will import, which things we will procure locally. So these are the standards that you need for purchasing, procuring the materials, and then you need for receiving how we are going to receive, what are the conditions of receive, the timing of the receiving, and the manner in which the receiving will be done, will be sanitized, how cold it should be, how we check the freshness and everything else, who will receive, who will approve. So those are the standards that the business has to set up for receiving. And then after receiving, how you are going to store it, what should be the temperature, how long you should store something, what should be the power level, how we are what are the housekeeping principle that we follow in store. So those are the storing standards. Then you have issuing standards, how we will issue, who will approve and everything else. Then the kitchen standards, what would be the wastage, what would be the standard portion size, the yield, what we will do with the wastage, spillage, or anything else in the kitchen. So we have different type of standards. I will not, we will not be covering the details of what are the standards should be, but we will see how we can implement those standards and what are the standard processes that we use when we want to check whether the standard is being followed or not. So we will not be covering the standard part, but we will be covering the checking part. That's the job of the cost controller. The cost controller job is not to establish the standards, right? And then you need standards for selling and serving the idea, the F&B products. So that's the process of the establishing the standards only. So we would be looking at some standards related to purchasing function very quickly. So the the standards related to purchasing function will be covering the quality of food purchase. So to ensure that the food purchase is consistent, is in line with the taste which is required by the chef, right? And to plan ahead of the requirements, and also eliminate the misunderstanding between the kitchen and the producer and the steward, because the daily order is done by the kitchen or the steward, and the purchaser is going to buy it. So if they don't know that what should be the size of apple, or what should be the size of the what should be the color of apple, then the kitchen would be asking 10 apples, but if we don't tell what should be the size, the purchaser will go and buy the cheapest, right? That's usually the problem that we face many of the time, because of no standards on the purchasing, the quality of food being purchased. If you say local beef, it can be any beef, right? It can be from any farm, unless you specify that the beef has to give you 80% yield, and it has to come from a specific city or a specific farm, because you have already tasted the quality, then it will ensure consistency. Otherwise, it will not ensure the consistency. So that's the important aspect of the purchasing function. Then the quantity of food purchased. That's one is quality, and the another is the quantity. To that the power stock need to be defined based on the consumption, what should be the store level, based on how fast we can get the delivery, and then you are going to order the food to ensure that you are not overstocking and also not understocking. So usually the power levels are set up to ensure the purchasing is done consistently. And then the price, finally the price at which the food is purchased. So the it has to be purchased from the approved supplier if the hotel has a system of approving the suppliers. And usually it depends on if the supplier has any specific if the hotel has any specific demand. Let's say you are buying only Norwegian salmon, and there is only one importer for that fish. So you cannot follow three quotations, right? So in that case, you will specify for certain items you don't need three quotation, and for the rest of the items you have to take the three quotation rules. So you have to have a clear guideline for the purchasing, which items you need three quotations, which items we don't need three quotations. Then sometimes there are fixed prices, like hotel is done the fixed price contracts with the suppliers, usually for dry items, non-perishable item, for wines, water, tissues, and the cutleries. So normally you do a group purchasing contract with the suppliers to buy at fixed prices, no matter what is the size, what is the season of the hotel, or how much the quantity you are buying, is always the fixed price. So sugar, everything else which is dry items, usually we can fix the price. Even for the perishable items, we normally the hotels usually have monthly cycle of fixing the price for the month or for at least 15 days, so that the purchaser doesn't have to go to the market all the time and check the price if it's right or wrong, right? Otherwise the price will continue to vary significantly. But if there are significant price variations, the purchasing department usually has to inform the the purchaser, the executive chef, to make sure that they are actually adjusting the recipe if it's in case it's required and it's a long term price difference, right? That's an important aspect of the purchasing. And also they need to continue to do the periodic survey to make sure the suppliers are not giving them super high prices. They may charge higher than the market because they are going to deliver you, they have rejections, they have standards to follow. So the price of the hotels usually are slightly higher than the market, or sometimes even equal to the market. But because they have certain standards that they have to follow, and the hotels have a right to reject, and they are getting delivered at the hotel, right? But because they are buying in bulk, so suppliers are usually happy to deliver at their conditions. So it depends on the purchasing power of the hotel. That's the standard related to purchasing functions. So it's a example of the very typical example of the kitchen order that you can how you decide how much we need to buy in the future, right? So that's just only a very simple example. So in this case, let's say the this particular restaurant expects the total guests to be 25, 30, 40, 30, 50, 60 based on the forecast. So every month, every week, you have to have a forecast for the next 7 days and say, okay, this is what I want to buy for the next 6 months, right? So you have two items only here. One is the chicken and one is the tomato soup, right? So chicken curry and the egg curry. So you only have two items, no other item. So the popularity of the chicken item, chicken curry is 80%, 50%, 30%, 20%, 70%, 90%. So you have to estimate which item is the most popular. Then you can calculate the estimated demand. Based on the recipe, you can calculate how much ingredient you will need. So there's a standard portion. That's why the standard portion is important to understand, because it will help you to order the kitchen. Usually, the kitchens chefs are not following this technical method. I explained this just for the understanding of non-chefs, right? Non-kitchen guys, how they would do in their mind the math of ordering. Usually, the chefs, the kitchens are ordering based on their estimate, right? Based on their thumb rule. I need usually 10 kilo of rice, 10 kilo of onion, 10 kilo of chicken. That's my weekly order minimum. If they think that a business is going down, then they may order 8 kilo. But there is no really the scientific formula behind this. Or you have any scientific formula in your properties? How your Do you know how your hotels are ordering the food and beverage items?
No, that's beyond my scope. But we are looking at this popularity. Are we looking at how this popularity is determined?
No, no, no. This popularity is just only estimate, just for me to explain how you can define the order. Usually in the hotels, in any kind of restaurant, you only have few items which are the hot selling items, right? Maybe a couple of items which are usually the most selling items. So usually the chef will say, okay, if I need to make, let's say, how many portions I'm gonna make of this particular item, and based on the standard recipe, what would I need basically. So that's just a way to calculate, but usually the actual orders are not done this way. Actual orders are done based on assumption. I need 5 kilo of the chicken, so you can see uh, the average here based on the calculation is 4 kilo of chicken every week, per day, right? And the egg is going to be 133 eggs per day. Tomato is 3 kilo per day. So what they do is they make a judgment based on their experience of working in the property or working in the restaurant, how much is the usual consumption, and then they base it on there. But the better way, of course, is to use a proper forecasting system based on the previous history, sales, popularity, and the recipe, so that it can forecast how much they would really be needing, right? Based on which day, so that they can ask the supplier. If their supplier is delivering on a daily basis, then they can know, I need 4 kilo on this day, only 1 kilo on another day, so that you can use concept called just in time, right? So that you don't have to stock it a lot.
Absolutely.
So if what the chef would do, they will ask for 30 kilo for the next week. That would be delivered on Monday, and then they will put it to the freezer, and that 30 kilo will lie in their freezer for the whole week. If the forecast go wrong, this 30 kilo is not going to be used, right? Or maybe 6 kilo will use, 40, 5 kilo will use, and then after that the lockdown happens, and then everything go waste. Or you continue to have that in the freezer, but the cost of the electricity to keep that frozen is going to exceed the value of the inventory in that freezer, right? So that's usually the problem, especially during these times when the sales volume are uncertain. You have to have a very tight control on the orders and the wastage, and the best way is to forecast based on the based on the number of items that you can think and sell. And that's the reason why, as a hotelier nowadays, we are forcing the chefs to reduce the menu items that they produce, um, for in the kitchen, so that the menu, or the mise en place, or the inventory item that they need to keep in order to produce those items is minimized, right? So that's the concept here. Got it?
Yes, got it.
Okay.
Sir.
So that's the concept of the kitchen ordering system. That's how it should work. That's the My purpose of teaching is how it should work, not the how it actually works. Then the other control that we normally put in purchasing is the par control, par level. So we set up the par levels, and the reorder level based on, let's say, the last 6 months. So this is an example of one hotel that we have. So how we set up the example. So for example, this is the bar gel, right? So what is the item? So purchase is an imported item. So we know that this is imported item. So there has to be a minimum order for to buy these items. If the supplier is locally available and they have imported in bulk for you to sell in retail, then it's easier. But if you have to import by yourself, then you have to follow the minimum quantity that the supplier is willing to sell you, and also to avoid high transportation charge on a frequent purchase. So you have to calculate the economic order quantity for calculating the reorder level. So that you will be probably learning from the inventory systems, but that's not a very difficult thing. Um, Based on the consumption of last 6 months, this is the consumption of last 6 months. It means the consumption per month is this, and the lead time is, let's say, 1, right? And shelf life is 18. So it means you can have a minimum stock of only 2, and the 2 is coming from B being consumption per month multiplied by the lead time. So that's the minimum stock you need to have, even if whenever you are going to order. So the reorder quantity is based on the packing, or the based on the lead time plus one the transportation time, right? So lead time is 1 month, consumption per month is 1.67. Here the reorder quantity is based on the packaging size. So if one packet minimum contains 6, you don't have a choice, you have to order 6 only. You cannot order anything less, right? But the maximum stock you can always see, is going to be the maximum consumption into the lead time consumption times the maximum months that you think you are going to keep. So that's 5 in this case. uh, C is the lead time, and B is the consumption times 3. So what is the minimum? Basically the minimum stocks times 3. That's the calculation for maximum stock. But maximum stock will be defined again based on the size of the warehouse, or the size of the store that you have. Not everything is going to be calculated in the same way. So basically the idea is you have to have a par level, and that should be based on 3 to 6 months consumption. So you can base on 3 months consumption, or based on last 6 months consumption. So where, if you think that the hotel is growing on the demand, then you just take only last 3 months. If the demand is more consistent, then you can take last 6 months. Usually we calculate the par level every if they are, because the hospitality is a seasonal business, we normally calculate par level different for each season, and we take the average of the last season as a basis to calculate the par level for coming season.
Sir,
Hmm.
this R level is synonymous to that EOQ.
No, par level is the basically the how much you should have in your circulation at all the times.
Oh,
And the
okay, it's an
EOQ
estimate.
is, yeah, is the estimate how much you should have around in your stock around this particular time of time. But the
And
EOQ
EOQ is
is
economically calculated.
economically calculated how much you should be ordering. So that's the how
Oh,
much you should order.
okay, okay.
So economic order quantity is the actual order quantity, how much you should be ordering. But that is defined based, so that's why the usually the maximum stock is reorder level plus a minimum level, minimum stock plus the reorder quantity. That's the maximum stock that you usually allow in the
Mhm.
hotels, because the reorder level is usually the lead time into the monthly consumption how of that lead period. So by the time you place the order, you will be nearly reaching the by the time
Buffer
you
stock.
place the order and receive the order, you would be
Mhm.
around the minimum stock. So
Correct.
the
The
maximum,
buffering stock for the
yeah, the
meanwhile.
buffer stock, yes. So the maximum stock should be reorder level, minimum stock plus the reorder level. That's the usually the formula.
Understood.
Uh,
Thank you.
yeah. So the par levels are calculated based on 3 to 6 months average, and you need to, but you need to always consider the change in, if there is, if you are noticing any change in the guest behavior or change in the standards or future trend in the business. What are the changes? Whether they are normally, like for example, what I used to observe is that because of a standard, the guests were not using the, let's say, the razors, right? So they because of the guest profile was changing and length of stay was changing, there were not many razors being used. But because they have a habit of just ordering based on the previous order, they just placed everything again, even though the razors were always already very high in the stock, but they just order because they have a habit of ordering. So they did not recalculate before they order again, and there was a change in that. And sometimes we change the standard. Sometimes we change the logo, or we have a plan to change the logo, and we are waiting for the stock to finish, right? But if you don't tell the purchaser that we need to change the standard in the future, don't order too much. He will again repurchase everything, and then you have to wait for the inventory to finish. And then the lead period is need to be confirmed with the purchasing all the time, plus the supplier, that this lead period which you are mentioning is reasonable or not, especially in these times when you are having a travel and cargo restrictions. And it also it's also vary by the purchase price level, and the minimum order quantity, considering the options, right? So if, let's say, the supplier has a thing that uh, if you buy, let's say, 10 pieces, the price is going to be X, and if you buy 20 pieces, price is going to be the lower price. So which one you should be using as a minimum order quantity, right? So it depends on the what is our hotel policy. Are we going to take the discounts? Do we have extra storage to keep and avail the discount or not? If we don't, then we don't take the value, the benefit of discount. We just buy what we want. And the reorder quantity is normally based on the packaging. So it's not the specific fixed amount of the reorder quantity. It's based on the around rounded off, or you can say round up to the next packaging level, whatever is the packaging. Okay, and the maximum order is based on the storage capacity. So you cannot have a maximum order higher than the storage capacity. So if your overall storage capacity is, I mean, the storage capacity is full based on the all the maximum values that you for all the stock items. Let's say you have calculated the maximum stock level of your hotel, and then now you are going and saying, how do I store these items? If the store is smaller, then you need to adjust your maximum level again. It means you also need to adjust your reorder levels, because that's the formula for maximum stock is minimum stock plus reorder level, right? So you have to adjust that. Okay, so I think the rest of the things we will discuss tomorrow. Is that okay?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay. Okay. So the rest of the controls we will be doing tomorrow, because then the main controls are the kitchen controls in cost control. So we will be doing that tomorrow. Okay.
Sure, sir.
Okay.
No issues.
Okay,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today.